Hi, this is Greg Hildebrandt. I've been a professional artist for 62 years. I've done a lot of artwork in that time, and I'm still just trying to get it right. That Gene just checked the mic to make sure it was working.
And it wasn't, apparently.
It wasn't working.
So again,
Hello.
hi Elijah.
Can you hear them?
Yes or no?
Is there anybody out there?
Is
Yeah.
there anybody out there?
Got Elijah out there
Elijah, hello Elijah.
saying hi. We got 5 people watching us be
All right.
goofy now.
So
Go ahead.
well, I mean, you Keith kind of like defined sort of invented the subject for today, which is like the different genres that I jump in and out of, and like the different hats that I wear. So I decided to put this kind of like very cool. I used this one for Scrooge for Unicorn Publishing when I illustrated Charles Dickens' classic, and that whole coats and all kinds of things. But I mean, in what we do, I've done over the years, I've used all kinds of props and devices from all over the place, different subjects, different genres.
Use that for the Mad Hatter too.
Yes, I used this for the Mad Hatter, which seemed appropriate. It's whatever. It's
Yes, it is whatever. All right, so before we get talking about our subject at large, just wanted to remind everybody, do a little bit of the business first here, that we have a sale going on currently with our Trans-Siberian Orchestra merchandise. It's all official merchandise from the band, no bootleg crap here. Not including original art, so just clothing products, old concert tour books, lithographs and prints, things like that, all marked down. The link to it is in the description of this video, of the live stream, and it's like 20 to 75% off all clothing. Clothing is the only thing that's not marked off on the site. All clothing is 50% off, and those discounts are processed manually, so you're not going to see it in your cart, but what you're actually charged and billed, that's where it will reflect in.
pretty good.
So that's that. So we're continuing on kind of with the whole comic book convention season feel and theme, and as we mull over ideas and thoughts, something that we've kind of touched on here and there in various episodes is you working in different genres, right? A lot of different genres. Now, a lot of times you hear about artists getting pigeonholed into one thing, right? And you said you dealt with that maybe a little bit in the very beginning of your career, that you fought against it.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, well, it was like Tim and I had already started our career in Detroit at the Jam Handy Organization in the animation department. I worked there for 6 years. Then I came to New York and did documentary films for a while for Fulton J. Sheen, and then I started illustrating in general. And we happened to do a couple of books for Holt, Reinhardt, and Winston on trees. They were doing a series on nature appreciation for kids. And so they had these 2 little girls adopt an oak tree in Central Park. And so we did that book, and everybody then kind of like said, "Oh, you're the tree guys." So we get classified to do trees. And then the second book in the tree series was a tree by David's house with a little a sycamore tree. That seed gets planted, and he grows up while the tree grows up. And that one got a award at the Illustrators Society, Merit Award, one of the illustrations. And that even kind of like clinched it even more so now. We're the tree guys. And so I would constantly try to bust out of that mold. I mean, it was not something I ever wanted to do.
Yeah.
To get, number one, to get categorized by anything or by anybody, by an editor or the art director or publisher. I didn't want any categorization because I already had a multiple career up to that point even, and it wasn't it wasn't until later you realized that to not to specialize because that could go out of style or out of fashion or out of need or want if you land on this one thing and you're out of business. And so many comic artists in the past, I think, where that happened to them. They more or less stayed in their one genre, not only their genre but their era of the era that they were in, and they became known and they were working and they stuck with that. And then you lose work. So just on a pragmatic level, it's better to diversify. So you kind of but on my part, I never thought of it in terms of economics. I was interested in too much stuff. As a kid, I was just all over the place, interested in too many things.
If I could have you speculate for just a bit, why do you think art directors tend to
categorize? Because that's what humans do. Oh, you're a liberal. Oh, you're a conservative. Oh, I know where to put you on the shelf in my head.
Okay.
And everybody does it to everybody for all kinds of reasons in all ways. You're this way or you're that way. You're in, and I think it's in the business though of illustration. It's like they want to open up a book and say, "Oh, I'm looking for a tree guy. Oh, there he is. There's the car guy. There's the pinup girl guy," and and it's I think quicker for them to do. I guess.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? It's a fast way to get at something, and I think the concept was always too that if you specialize, you're an expert. If you're all over the place, you're not an expert. You're a jack of all trades and master of none.
Okay.
And I think that kind of concept was there. So if a guy, all you did was car renderings, well, Mark, this guy's like freaking. I mean, he's the man. He's the car guy.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think it's categorization. People need to put stuff on a shelf.
Okay.
You need to categorize. There's always this categorization thing. The religious section in the bookstore, the philosophy section, the whatever. It's always to a degree you can understand that.
Yeah.
But don't, as far as I was always concerned, don't try to classify me personally as an artist.
Yeah. I guess looking at it, fans do the same thing though. That
sure.
If you become a fan of an artist,
there you go. Look at this. I was doing the Lord of the Rings, and there's Galadriel from my brother's and my 1976 calendar. Here's a pinup I did, Black Widow. I named it. It's a guy. You can see them coming up the stairs. It's like 1940s. Noir type concept. From the 40s, 50s, whatever. Pulp magazine cover. Two extreme worlds. When I got famous for this with my twin brother, this gave us a global fandom, right? Big following around the world for our Lord of the Rings art. And when I switched over to this subject, people were like, "I'm knocking my hat off." So it's time for another hat here. Let's see what the hell we have. I don't know. This Indiana Jones type job. And so when I switched over, not switched, but just decided I wanted to do pinups, people were flummoxed. People that got to know me for this couldn't get or dig the idea that I did this. I should just keep doing this. And it kind of like part of that, I think, and we do it too, I think, with music.
Yeah.
Is I think part of that is people want to keep me, the way I think of it, not necessarily, but it's one idea that I have. People like to keep me in their past. I became famous for they were a kid when they discovered my Lord of the Rings calendars, and oh my God, I had those calendars. Oh my God, I had this up on the wall. I had this poster, and then they see me doing something now, and they can't quite grasp it. They want it to be that which they first discovered before. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I think there's something there too.
Yeah, and I almost wonder if it's that they want the same subject matter or they want the same visual tone.
I think there's a sense. Maybe there's a sense of security that gets lost. they kind of depend on the fact that you can always trust this one point of view or one thing that I can go to. And I get that. I can understand that. I feel that myself.
It's something that evokes, this particular thing evoked an emotional response with me. And when I was looking forward to your next thing, I was hoping for that same emotional response.
And wham, you throw this at me.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that, and that's, hey, I guess, I mean, I'm the same way, I think, in a sense, about a lot of things.
Yeah, sure. Everybody is to a degree.
Yeah. And so, but for me, it's like, I just don't like to stay with one thing. I mean, and these are all props that I use for all my many things. To get this damn thing on. But this was for a helmet that Gene's brother got me. There's a visor that sticks out of the front. But this was made for Time Bandits, for Terry Gilliam's film. This was used in Time Bandits. So that's very cool. You know what I mean? One of my favorite movies. Well, one of my favorite directors. But I mean, I use this stuff. I use all these hats for characters and props and everything.
When you said there's a visor coming off of it, I imagine one of those green, like accounting or dealer visors coming off.
That'd be an interesting combination. I like that. But look, here's the thing. So the very first book, and
so hang on one second before we go on. Timo, sorry if I can't read the names today. It says Nifty Hat, Greg. Someone's liking your hat. And DTH Rocket says that they found you from your Bomber Nose art video.
Oh.
And started following you from that.
Okay.
And Timo says, I've learned not to put artists in a box and to accept the unexpected.
That's the thank you.
Yes. That's the perfect ideal audience member.
Yeah, here's the very first book that I illustrated. The Man Who Found Out Why. It's a book about Gregor Mendel, the Austrian priest, who was finally became known as the father of genetics. This kind of art I was doing for the book. There he is. He was working with peas, cross-pollinating peas, and he became wildly the father of genetics. And that was the very first book illustrated. And I was working at the Jim Handy organization in Detroit, working in industrial film. And this book is 1963. So that's my very first book that I illustrated. But the thing is, I got into the whole documentary filmmaking for Fulton J. Sheen, and I made films on world hunger. I did camera. I was shooting 16 millimeter back then for these films. Professional full sound movies using Aeroflex and Niagara tape recorder combination mainly, then an Eclair French camera. And I was going around shooting poverty for the bishop to put into films to bring Americans to an awareness of the whole third world. So I did that for 6 years.
Okay, so you were doing the filmmaking. Did the filmmaking come after that book, or did that book come?
This book came first before the filmmaking.
Okay, so you were working in the animation studio,
and then I did this book. And then this was at the same time I came to '63. That's when I started in New York for Fulton J. Sheen in '63. So this book was published about the same year that I started working for him.
Okay, so when you were trying to get that book, do you remember any of that process of like what you were showing off at the time in order to land the book, or how did that come about?
Yeah, well, I mean, I did samples. They wanted to see what it looked like in ink, and Tim and I had not done anything in ink, and then he wanted to see it would be a two-color. Some of the pages would be two-color, that is to say, black ink line with one color, and we determined that would be the color, this sort of like umber, sort of neutral umber color to use as a secondary color. And then we did a sample. We just did a sample for them, and they liked it, so they gave us the book. So we did, a whole bunch of illustrations in this book. But then I did the films, completely different genre. I mean, it was you're up to that point, I was working in animation, like I say, doing artwork, principally designing films, doing storyboards, finally some animation, production design of shorts, industrial films for commercial purposes, U.S. Steel, Ford, GM. the Navy, the U.S. Navy this company did training films for the Navy and for the Air Force. And so I did that, and then did this book, and then boom, I'm doing these live action films, and I'm mainly shooting. I became a cinematographer and a sound guy and an editor for 6 years.
Yeah, guerrilla filmmaking, right?
Yeah.
So, how did you get from the point of working on the artwork of the film to someone allowing you to hold the camera?
Well, we had done. We were, like I say again, working at Jim Handy's. I was working in the live action studio. They had a fully equipped live action studio. So I'd be down there doing some work in the studio and working in the film strip division and when I made a film for the Sisters of St. Joseph while I was in Michigan. This writer who I was working with at Jim Handy's got the job to produce, to direct, to write this. They called them a vocation film. It was like a half-hour film to get girls to go to the convent. That's about it. Yes. So, but the nuns, the Sisters of St. Joseph in Michigan, at least, is where this all took place. Their base was Kalamazoo, Michigan. They did a lot of good work. They did hospitals. Back then they had orphanages when they had orphanages, and they were all over the place doing all kinds of stuff like that, charity stuff more or less. So we went around and shot all the stuff that they were doing. So in that process, by virtue of the fact I knew nothing about using that kind of, I had 8mm cameras. I had a Brownie and I had a Keystone, so which is a completely different matter, pretty simple to work. And we started renting this equipment to shoot these films and renting lights and exposure meters and tape recorders and all that stuff, and figured it out on our own. There was no book that we had to go by. Nothing. Tim and I just were figuring it out. We'd go rent a camera, and we were driving from Detroit to Kalamazoo, figuring out how to work the camera in the car. Like how do you load this with a magazine? And by the time we got there, we had to figure it out. It was pretty simple, really. Yeah. And sometimes the camera would stop working, and I remember one time we had an Eclair. It was a French camera, and we just took the whole damn thing apart. And couldn't see anything wrong with it. Put it back together again, and it worked. Just simply put it back together, and it worked. So, but we kind of faked that. You jump into you either sink or swim. You figure it out as you go. I mean, mainly that's what my whole career is, because I figured it out as I go.
Yeah. So, after you got out of the filmmaking, and that's kind of when you really decided to pursue illustration, correct? Well, and then you dove into children's books.
That was a place to go for illustration back then. You figure, well, where do you go? I wasn't even thinking of comics. Let's go over to DC. Or Marvel by this point. Now, I never even thought of it. It just never entered my mind. I mean, it was like we were thinking more. First of all, painting.
Yeah.
And so it would be the big companies, Macmillan and Random House and Western Publishing, Golden Books. That's where we went first. We simply called the art director. In those days, you could call an art director. They'd answer, and you say, "I'm so and so. I would like to come and show you my portfolio. Come on over." The next day or 2 days. It wasn't like you had to wait for 14 months. And we brought a portfolio into Carlo De Lucia, who was the chief art director at Golden Books. This was 1969. And he liked what he saw. He said, "I don't have anything right at the moment, but my friend Frank Lamacchia at Holt, Reinhardt, and Winston, they're doing all their, he's the art director, and they're redoing all their textbooks. They did readers for kids, grade school kids. And they were all illustrated. And so I went over there, and Frank liked what he saw, and he gave us a job right off the bat. That was the tree books.
Okay.
Boom, he just gave us this tree book to do. And that was it. We were there for doing freelance as freelancers working for Holt, literally for about 3 years, illustrating tons and tons and tons of books. And then we'd go off to other publishers. I remember it was Random House, and there was an art director there. They were doing Disney books. So Tim and I did Cinderella. They gave us Cinderella to do. And at this time, the books they were all drawn. The books that the art director liked was pencil line like Richard Scarry. Anybody look up Richard Scarry if your kids or grandkids ever had those books. They're like beautifully drawn. He used to be a Disney artist, and he came up with his own style of cute animals and clothes with a pencil outline look and then flat colors. You know, that kind of look. So you could I think draw the pencil line and then Xerox it, you know, on a cell and flop it over a color, you know, rendering underneath of it. So that's what animation was done, like Mowgli and the Jungle Book and 101 Dalmatians, that look. And then, but Tim and I decided, outside the art director's directions, to kind of just handle it like the movie, to try to make it look like the animated film with the flat rendering on the characters and the colored outline, which would be ink back in the day. Those flat colors were inked on the back of the cell, and on the front of the cell were the colored inks, you know, defining the character. And so we tried that look to try to make it look like the movie, and we brought it into the art director, and he hated it. He was an older guy. He snuffed it. He said, "Oh, you like this old stuff?" And well, he printed it. They used it. The deadline was, but so the next time he said, "Don't give me any of that again. Give me this." So the next one we did a bunch of them for them, and did that style with the pencil line and all that. So you just go with the flow. I mean, you're working, you give them what they want, but you got to be able to jump all over the place, you know.
So Deanne is chiming in, said that she bought your and Tim's Lord of the Rings calendars in the 70s.
Yeah.
Said she's a fan from way
70s.
back.
Yeah, well, yes, you know me for that. Here, I like to play that one. You know me for my Lord of the Rings work, but do you know me for my toilet training book? Toilet training in less than a day. Tim and I did these black and white spot illustrations throughout the entire book for these two young pediatricians who would come up with this whole method of toilet training. And so, you know, what do? I mean, yeah, it's like, how do you get into it, you know? But we tried. I mean, we said, well, let's try a different line treatment. Let's make sure it's drawn well, get some emotion into the thing. So I shot models. My son, Greg, posed. He just finished toilet training, so he was kind of embarrassed to be posing for this.
Yeah.
You know, we bust him till this day. You know, we constantly. But I mean, you either say yes to this because mainly we said yes to it because you got to make a living.
Yep.
I had 3 kids and I had to pay my mortgage, you know, and everything else. So you say yes to it, and then when you say yes to it, you give it everything you got. Try to make it as good as you can make it. But
so, in the early days, again, going into the children's book stuff, you're doing it for like 3 years. Go through a period of where they start to try to give you be the tree guys, which I've got to say, looking at Old Man Willow and Fellowship of the Ring, you guys do wonderful trees.
They're beautiful things, man. I mean, you know, it's like they're fantastic to paint.
So, going from the children's book stuff to now these Lord of the Rings paintings, was there? I know that, you know, we've talked about that story before on the show where you guys answered a submission call, an open call for submissions.
Yep.
And you were the only pros.
Nobody showed up. I mean, because back then, most professional illustrators disdained fantasy, what they call fantasy art. I don't know to this day why. I mean, I can guess. They thought it was demeaning or stupid or immature or backward or some goddamn thing. I don't know why.
Or it could have been they were afraid of getting pigeonholed in a genre that wasn't taken very seriously at the time.
At the time, The Lord of the Rings was not. It was mainly college kids. That's what made it big here in the 60s, right?
Yep.
It got really big on university campuses. And I remember walking into the city, going and dropping a job off and seeing Frodo Lives scrawled on the walls, you know? And so I think adults looked at that like some, you know, this is some radical college student crap. I don't want anything to do with this. I'm a lawyer. I'm a doctor. I'm not going to read that shit. And yet, gradually, what they call it, there were doctors and lawyers reading The Lord of the Rings in the closet without telling anybody. You know,
Yeah.
Come on, it's one of the greatest works in English literature, right? I mean, it's considered to be so. So I don't know what they thought of it. I guess, well, it's the same thing. They always demeaned and derided comic books, comic strips. It was always derided and demeaned. I guess people need something to look down on.
Yeah.
And feel superior. I'm above all that. I'm better than that. I'm brighter than that. Not that shit. That's for the masses. This you stupid, you know.
So,
you know, like you know what I'm saying. Like,
well, that's the best.
I say this to you. You shall not read that. You know, that's going back to the church. I think, you know, when they disallowed reading. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they could keep control. You know. I had no
idea that was coming.
I didn't either. I didn't know when it would come. I did know it was coming, but I didn't know when. But I don't know. But I digress. No, the thing is, where the hell were we? Oh yeah, the Lord of the Rings. You were saying you were a big fan. Because so many people were. I remember there was so much lack of imagination. I guess there still is. I mean, people just have no. Christ, I remember when I first grew a beard. This was 1960. When I went to Africa to film, and that's a whole other story for the church, Catholic Church. And I grew a beard there. That was 1969, and so beards, you know, like the use of hair to make a statement has always been throughout history. I know there are times in history where a beard has been forbidden. Only the king could wear a beard, and you know, it was all over. But I grew a beard. It was probably this length, and I had really short hair. And I wore a suit and tie because I was commuting into New York to the office. And these guys on the PATH trains, that's the trains that connect New Jersey and New York City, and they go underwater. You get to the station here on the Jersey side, in Journal Square, New Jersey, and all the guys, you know, the suits and tie guys, would all line up at the doors. There were women, and the trains that come in, and the guys packed, they ran for those seats and plopped out with their Wall Street journals buried in their noses, boom, boom. Women standing, you know, strap hanging, pregnant women. They never looked up. They just stayed buried. I saw it for years. I'm thinking, what the shit, man? What's wrong? I mean, what the hell? Where do these guys grow up? You know what I'm saying? I grew up in a world of a woman study. You stand them and give her a seat, for Christ's sake. None of them. When I came back from Africa with the beard, and I got onto the train for that first day. I'll never forget it, on Monday morning. And they peered down over their Wall Street journals and glowered at me. I mean, they stared with looks of hate because I had a beard. And I got into the office, and one guy, really reactionary guy, says, "Ooh, that looks properly sinister." And I pointed to a picture of Jesus he had on the wall. This is what the fuck? You know, anyway, I don't know where that is going, but nonetheless.
That's fine. We like the bunny trails.
Categorizations again, you know?
Yeah.
Fuck categorizations, you know? It's...
So I saw for the first time an interesting tie from your early illustrated books to the Lord of the Rings. And that's that umber tone that you put under the inks.
Burnt umber.
And that's then what you guys used really for the grounding, right? The shadow colors and
the rings.
All the rings.
Mainly in this stuff, yeah. Well, it'd be cool in this one. See, but you still, it's very subtle and grayed down. The palette on these were much more backwards. I think that was due to the fact that we were using. We talked about this before. Tim and I we have very limited art education, so one of my main pieces of information was from Vincent Minnelli's film on Van Gogh with Kirk Douglas, Lust for Life.
Yep.
And great film. He's in there. There's a scene in the film where he's on the shore somewhere with an actor playing Pizarro, the other so-called impressionist painter, and they're talking. Pizarro's talking. Look, there's color everywhere under the leaves. There's color everywhere. Throw away your black. Throw away your black. So Tim and I, we went home and threw away our black. How the hell are you going to get to a shadow though? You know, because that's a crutch. You squeeze black into to make it darker when you're younger. You know, when you don't know color in light yet, and so we always kept trying to figure out a way to get. How the hell do you get to it dark? I mean, there's all kinds of theories. I never had really studied any theories on that whole subject, which are many and magnificent and throughout history. But so that's kind of like the way why the Rings paintings were always that earth tone thing, because we were mainly using burnt umber as the darkest color.
So didn't Rembrandt and those guys also use that umber?
Yeah, it was Rembrandt particularly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vermeer not. So Vermeer was very much like real light. You know, at the diffused light coming through. My God, he was incredible. Holy shit! Like, but yeah, no. There's and then a lot of painters back then and now, I guess I don't know. They would underpaint on the canvas or whatever surface they're painting on with burnt umber.
Yeah.
Underpaint, like I guess block it in, rough it in.
Yeah, like your shadows.
And I remember going and seeing a show at the Metropolitan Art Museum in New York City of Velasquez, and I'm looking. You see, and I could always see it in the reproductions. There's a sky, but brown is showing through, and I'm wondering. He certainly wasn't intending air pollution back then, because I don't think that would have probably not been that way yet. So it was just the undercoating, and I said, it did. What's the sense of painting brown underneath of a blue sky? It just logically didn't work for me. It just didn't make any sense. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
So, but a lot of people use burnt umber too as an under thing.
Yeah.
And
burnt sienna, one or the other.
Yeah, the earth's color for some reason, even though it's the sky. That's the earth. There's the sky up there. It's a different thing. You know, so I never got that. I heard somewhere the so-called impressionists, I'll keep calling that because they even call themselves that. They were not out to make impressions. You know, they were painting hastily to get the lighting, you know, of the moment and the action and the scene. So it's all very fast painted. That's why it looks so loose. But their method primarily was direct painting on a white surface. Direct painting. You mix your color, you put it around to the white, you blend it all into the white. So that's how I and Tim painted for years. That basic format. Direct painting on a white surface. With the admonition from my 6 months of art school from Bill Meinzinger, the teacher, the owner of the school, and the teacher of the color and design class. He said, in terms of light and color, if there's a warm light on the subject, there's a cool shadow. If there's a cool light on the subject, there's a warm shadow. That one sentence is one of those earth-shattering sentences for me. And that applied to what our color, that basically began Mike and Tim's color theory. Then it was like using that to directly paint onto a white surface. And then, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, I was painting a picture, I think it was for the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, in fact, a hotel, high shot of a hotel looking down for Lost Christmas Eve. And I painted the canvas all dark purple, just a layer of, which, when I say dark purple, I'm talking dioxazine purple. It's a color that Tim and I discovered when we were doing Ursharak, our own novel. We discovered the color purple, dioxazine purple, to use as the shadow color, as opposed to burnt umber. So that gave those paintings a much stronger look. That's Ursharak. All the stuff I got pictures of here. He's the bad guy, decent on evil. But no, that's using purple to go into the shadows. You know, let me try to get this. And so these are painted direct onto a white surface. Then, like I say, into the future a little bit, I was painting this scene that had to be a nighttime scene, backlit with blue moonlight, but it's still very dark, and you're on a hotel front, a big building with all lit up windows. And so I painted the whole canvas black, that dioxazine purple, transferred my drawing to the white transfer paper underneath, so I got my lines, and then started to paint on top of that dark by putting a light in a window. Boom! It instantly looks lit. You have a sense of lighting. So now I almost paint 90% of my paintings on a black surface.
Yeah. I've noticed. That's how you start them all.
It depends on the scene. If it's a sunny day, which I haven't painted too many of lately, in a bright middle of the day, like blue sky, white clouds, I wouldn't do that. I'd paint the whole canvas the color of the blue sky.
Yeah. Okay, so we're now still early in the career. We're in fantasy world,
1975.
Now, we're talking about like jumping genres, right? And navigating that successfully, not only commercially, but keeping certain things tonally accurate or whatever to keep your voice consistent through those genres, so that it's not completely unrecognizable. And so, like I said a few minutes ago, that was the first time I recognized that umber in that book, which then came to that. Now, at the same time of Lord of the Rings, there was a what now fantasy and sci-fi kind of go hand in hand, but for a long time they didn't. They were really kind of separate entities. Like you were either a sci-fi artist, you were a fantasy artist.
Sword and sorcery.
Yep, and you got thrown into Star Wars, right? At that.
Well, that one poster for the very first movie, yes.
Yep. Now the interesting thing that I think about that wasn't necessarily, we're looking for a sci-fi artist. That was, okay, they saw the Tolkien work.
Well, I mean, I don't know the whole story myself. I did the picture. I hear all kinds of stories. Everybody does like 10 stories about everything. I don't even know. I never met George Lucas, so I don't know what the actual reality of that situation is. But he was aware of our Lord of the Rings work. That much I know. And that was, and Tim and I had done a poster for this ad agency that was handling Fox's account in 20th Century Fox, produced the first Star Wars film, right? Alan Ladd Jr. was the head of the studio of Fox. And I done a poster overnight for Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein that never got used, but Tim and I painted it literally overnight. And the guys at the studio remembered that. And that was, 1973, 74, something like that. And then several years go by, and they give us a call. We're working on our own novel here, Ursharak. And while I'm just developing it, pretty much got it pinned down. All the characters are all pinned down. And storyline. We get a call, we need help. We got a poster for a science fiction movie. The director wants a poster done. He's got a poster here, but he thinks there's something that he's not satisfied with about it. And he said, "Will you guys help us out? Film's coming out in a week." And I said, "Sure." We jumped on the train from Jersey and went into the city. And they went over the job with us. We went home and we did it in 36 hours. Now we get famous for that. Now everybody's, "Oh, you're a Star Wars guy. You're a Star Wars artist." I mean, that's what I got known for that one painting. I got known as a Star Wars artist. And I guess because it was the time, it was the very first poster. So that kind of landed. And they told me, then years later, the guys running the studio, I'd seen him. I'd seen him for like 20 years. That Lucas had actually asked for us because he didn't know. Nobody knows. Anybody trying to get a film off the ground doesn't know if it's going to work or not. And we were famous for our Lord of the Rings calendars. And so he's the one, according to these guys, he asked them to get us to do the poster. And when we signed the poster, the final artwork, Tim and I signed our name just Hildebrandt back in the day. On the whole Lord of the Rings art. And then on this poster too, we signed it maybe, this big down here in the corner. And he got the picture over to him, and then he calls the next day and said he wants you to make your name bigger. So we went in and painted our name bigger, which normally is never done because who the hell gives a damn about the artist doing the poster? Nobody now there's a cult group that do, there are fans that do, but generally speaking, nobody did.
Not
a shit
back then.
Who gives a shit now about who designs a movie? Fans generally do. They care about the actor.
Yeah.
That's generally who they care about, right? They don't care about the cinematography. You take the cinematographer away, you don't have a movie. Take the makeup guy away. Take the guy who makes all the appliances and the props and the set designer, the lighting expert. Nobody cares about them. There's no. I don't know why. That's the stuff that I cared about in the movies.
Yeah.
That's what I always cared about. I'd always wait and see who's the special effects. John Fulton, the Ten Commandments. That's what I was interested in.
So, Ursharak is still in that fantasy genre of, similar to Lord of the Rings, right? They're sword and sorcery fantasy. But that's when you introduced the dioxazine purple into your work, which has carried through.
Yep.
You know, so that's an interesting, just stylistic note that you transferred out of using those umber tones as the shadows into those dioxazine purples, which helped, again, maintain that Hildebrandt voice, right? But I think, okay, so coming out of Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, and whatever other jobs you're doing at that time, you made what at the time would have seemed like a massive shift. Maybe not to you so much because you had done the children's book work previously,
Mm-hmm.
but you jumped back from serious fantasy into more of a children's oriented
With Unicorn.
with Unicorn Publishing.
Yeah, with Gene, and started Unicorn Publishing. And of course, we had already met in '79, and she became my agent and rep and everything else. And she started a publishing company and chose the public domain books to do all her favorites and my favorites: Wizard of Oz, Alice in Wonderland, Pinocchio. And yeah, but I jumped back into that in a brand new way too. I mean, using my colors that I had evolved along with my brother for all these years, the same principle and the same, dioxazine purple, but tackling the subjects that I'd loved since I was a kid, and taking on the challenge of that, because how many people there was like 400 people that illustrated Alice in Wonderland. I mean, major people. I'm talking up to Salvador Dali, and you just kind of like say, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to handle this?
Now, was there any kind of now the first one you did, which was A Christmas Carol, was not published by Unicorn. It was published by
Random House.
Now, to your knowledge, was there any kind of issue as Gene was pitching this idea to them, or were they just gung ho, or were they hesitant to have a Hildebrandt do something like that?
Oh no, they were totally good. Because I mean, the chief editor over there was a friend. I'd known her from my days of doing kids books, all these kids books, animal books like this. Well, this is a Golden Books book. But I was doing a lot of stuff with this company in Jersey, Platt and Monk, M-U-N-K, P-L-A-T-T and Monk, which is an old publisher. I went back to the little engine that could, and the editor over there had moved on to Up and Fast. She was very brilliant, great creative person, incredible. And she moved on, and she was in this position where she come on in. And so Gene presented it, and there was no arguments or difficulties. No, they were all turned on to the fact she wasn't everybody else did that I was going to do this.
So another one of the threads that I'm seeing it go through is connections.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing the right people in the right spots.
Well, yeah. I mean, knowing the right people. I mean, that's an interesting way to put it.
I mean, you have the right work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as you said, like you went in, you showed the one art director, he liked your work, but didn't have anything, so he introduces you to another guy.
Right.
And then you're building up there, and then...
It's about making connections, yes, exactly. That's how now I don't know how you do it. I mean, it's like Gene does all that work, but I mean, you never get through to anybody, And then it was all open door. You just called, you walk in, it was very friendly. It was really an open situation. And, the more you took it on yourself to be aggressive and to keep pushing, and the more you made phone calls and the more you got your work in front of people's eyeballs, the more possibility you were going to get work. That's what it came to. And when you got the job, you gave it 1,000,000,000%. And you gave it everything you had. If they asked you to walk 10 steps, walk 20, walk 50. Mm-hmm. I mean, come in on time, meet the deadline, and don't be temperamental. Don't not act like an asshole. Don't be friendly and nice and whatever you want. That's the way you do it. And that's the way we did it. And then once I met Jane, she basically said to me, "You paint and draw, I'll do everything else." So she's been the one that's been handling this since 1969, quite literally.
So,
But you're right. It's like you don't get anywhere without other people. And it's like those who either inspired you, those who got behind, like my parents, were totally supportive. And then I moved into the Jam Handies and the artists there, and Frank Goldman, Mr. Goldman, the director, the supervising director of animation, took Tim and me on like a grandfather figure, and he educated us in filmmaking and stop motion and all kinds of stuff. And so, but you make connections like that. And I made a connection with a writer there that finally led to doing these books that made their way to New York for Fulton J. Sheen to see. And then he saw these books in a publishing house here in Patterson, New Jersey, because he was friendly with the publisher. And that's why he hired Tim and me, found out that we were making films. And it's like your work. Well, how is it too? Your work and your reputation, your work precedes you, and it follows you. It's like, so whatever you're doing in the present moment, give it 1,000,000,000% of what you got. That's what it comes down to.
So, see some people chiming in. Greg talked about the Tolkien Years art book he did. Lord of the Rings is coming back with an Amazon TV series. Yes, we will talk about the Tolkien Years book, but not right now. We will be coming back with more of that at a later date. However, very interesting is that's essentially, when I first met you.
Mm-hmm. Watson Gupta.
One of my first jobs at Spiderweb Art was scanning.
Jean spent 20 years of her life trying to getting that book made, basically.
So here's a good question. How do you keep things fresh that are repetitive, like TSO art or your comic book stuff?
How do I?
How do you get jazzed about it?
How do I get jazzed about it? That's a kind of a weird question. It's a good question, I guess. I don't have an immediate answer because
I have an immediate answer.
I'm just
answer this question.
What am I? What's the answer? I'm jazzed.
Here's how Greg keeps it fresh. His focus isn't necessarily so much on the subject matter. He focuses in on the mechanics of composition, lighting, color,
right,
things of that nature. Once he gets the subject nailed, those things take over.
So you got a string of ventriloquist. Talk. Okay. No, he's right, but that's it. It's like everything is about construction. It's a construction job, and I like construction jobs. Yeah. Basically, you're a builder. You're an architect. You're a designer. You're an architect, and you're a carpenter. You're a mason. You do all kinds of stuff like that, and that's a trip for each picture. Yeah. It's fun to do it.
The other answer that I will give for that, particularly with TSO, because I believe we mentioned that when we were talking about the TSO earlier in the earlier episodes, or maybe it was just a private conversation we were having. You were talking about the settling into the TSO art, really you were good friends with Paul.
That was key,
and
Gene and I both got to know Paul very well and really knew his mind, his heart, his soul, and we were connected like that,
Yeah. And sorry to interrupt you, but your production of the art is keeping his vision alive.
That's the hope. That's the desire. That's the aspiration. That's the drive. That's the focus that we have. And I know Gene has, I have, Adam has, the whole band has, is to keep Paul's ideals, alive and well, And so, and I knew the man. I knew the message he was trying to convey in terms of a overall positive view of life and hope and beauty, and so that's inspirational to me. He was an inspiration. His music, when I first heard it, was inspirational as hell. I mean, particularly the Beethoven album, Beethoven's Last Night, and I just went nuts for it, and I still do. So for me, approaching each year is a whole brand new experience because to me, it's like John Steinbeck talked about that, how you approach a novel. Everybody challenges you to be great. And, after you do the Grapes of Wrath, what the hell do you do? Well, it's they expect that you're going to do the next one's going to be a fantastic masterpiece. Although horizons recede, it all disappears, and you're basically starting all over again.
Mm-hmm.
So that in itself keeps it alive and well, and you're always in the white space in a sense, in the unknown territory. A white piece of paper in front of you. What are you going to fill it up with?
Yeah.
How can you? The challenge is how do you do something that you didn't do before?
Yeah.
Just that is a challenge,
Now, we're closing in on the end of the time, but I want to ask you one more thing, because part of this story is an important aspect of changing genres successfully, and I didn't realize we could probably put in another hour. Just in your genre switching, but you then made the switch to comic books,
mm-hmm.
right? And that was probably one of the bigger stylistic changes that you had to.
Yep. That year, what was it, 93, I think Gene, I said to Gene, I woke up one day and said, Gene, I want to do something in comics. And she said, well, I don't think about that business at all. So she knew that I really wanted to do it, so she found out about it. And she started, as she always does, at the top. So she called Stan Lee and asked him who should she talk to at Marvel. Stan Lee said, well, here's the man to talk to, Joe Calamari. He happened to be the head at that time, 93. So Gene called Joe Calamari's office. They said, come on in. We went in. Joe, squid, he had a can of squid on his desk. Took us around, showed us Marvel. I've talked about this before many times. Tom DeFalco, the editor-in-chief at that moment. And they were hyper enthusiastic about me. And Tom turns to me at one point on the tour of the offices and everything. He says, Greg, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. He said, what are you doing here? And I said, what do you mean what I'm doing? He said, you're an illustrator. And I finally, I wasn't aware of that moment, but I gradually became aware of the fact that comic guys from a certain era, his era and before, all looked at comics but knew that the world looked at comics as a degenerate art form, as something that was less than nothing. And so most of the artists would pretend they went to a function or a party back in the day, 40s, 50s, never admit that they were comic artists. So but illustrators were on a higher level. They kind of like saw illustrators as up here somehow. Then of course fine artists were at the top of it, at the pinnacle. But illustrators, comic artists, illustrators, gallery artists, in that structure, which is bullshit as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, that kind of conversation existed, and hell, I saw comics as one of the most sophisticated art forms that there is. And the fools that don't see that, that's it. They're damn fools. They just don't understand. And so, then he said, okay, what do you want to do? And I said, well, what do you want? And he called Gene the next day. He said, how about a Marvel Masterpieces card set? And then, that's a whole long story, but nonetheless, you're talking about the style approach. Yeah, I kind of like jumped into that along with my brother. I was doing it first and then asked him to come in on the project. But I kind of like looking around at all kinds of art, that was being done in the 90s, and basically landed, I said, what the hell? If I'm going to look at somebody that defines Marvel Comics at that time, to me, it was obviously Jack Kirby. For God's sakes, who else?
Yeah.
Not that I would say that he's the only one, or that all the others artists were fantastic and great. They are, but if you're going to go and look at somebody, sort of, you can kind of look at him, not to copy him, but to just let it enter your system and be part of you.
Yeah, and that's a crucial element. Maybe we can kind of wrap it up on this point, is that the two key components is meeting people and having the right stuff and be cordial and do great work, right?
Yeah.
All that kind of goes hand in hand, and when you do all that, people want to help you and work with you. Mm-hmm. But being willing to change and dive headfirst into what you're going for,
and
Right.
be a
And
kid,
being willing to.
be a beginner.
Yeah.
Being willing to be a beginner.
Yeah.
Literally, that's where I was at. My mind was there. If they want me to sweep the floors, I sweep the floors. I literally was like that. And then literally, then like I say, Bob Budiansky was the editor that was working on the card set, and he was coaching me all through it. You know, when I was listening to every damn thing he had to say. And you know, you keep your ears open and your eyes open, and you listen, and you want to learn, and you want to do it, and you respect those people that you're going to because they're in the business and they know it and they know what they're doing, and you know, you want to learn from them, you know, and you want to just get it into your system and add to yourself and your own brain, you know, possibilities.
Yep. All right. So, Deanne asked, "Does Greg go to Comic Con?" Yes, he does. Not this year.
No, maybe, hopefully next year if the damn, you know, things have settled down.
Everything is settled.
We're not, you know, no.
Anyone here own the Psylocke marble masterpiece? I love that. It's Tim Hartwick's looking to buy it from the second-hand market.
Okay.
All right. Rags Rocket says, "Hey Greg, Rags here. Hello." So Tim Hardwick says hello. A lot of people chiming in saying hello. So everyone, you know, we're going to wrap it for the day, but thank you very much for joining in. If you'd like to hear a little bit more on, because we didn't even get Greg transitioning from other major ones at this point, going now from comic books into pinup art and deeper into rock and roll art.
Right.
We didn't even hit.
And all through that, my own self-generated ideas, concepts, stories, paintings, sequential arts, you name it.
So yeah, if you want to hear more of this type of thing with him going into that, hey, shoot us a line, let us know. If you don't want to hear it, shoot us a line, let us know. We don't want to bore anybody. But thanks for tuning in. As always, if you're liking what we do, hit the like button, subscribe button, share it, tell your friends about us. Remember, we have the TSO merch sale going on. We're clearing out old stock to make way for new. Clothing is 50% off. You know, old tour books are, you know, some of them are selling, you know, for $5 a piece. Other prints and lithos. We have lithographs that are signed by the entire band of that year, including Paul. So we have some real serious gems with some deep discounts. The link to our page is in the description of this video. We've also sent out an email campaign, Facebook, wherever you can find it to see what we're doing.
Is it jauntier on the side, or you wear it back, or how you wear it? It's like, in any event, go in pizza.
Go in pizza. Good night, folks.
Anyway, what the hell?
Find out how to shut this thing off.